So did you know that the most brutal scene in The Acolyte never made the final cut? I'm just as surprised as you are, but at Denver Fan Expo, Manny Jacinto shocked everyone in the room when he revealed that the original version of The Acolyte episode 5 was almost so much darker. And I've been talking about this kind of thing since the show came to an end, in my breakdown of the visual guide, in comments made by the showrunner. I'm starting to think there is a massive discrepancy between the original script and the final version of the High Republic show that we saw. And when I say original script, I'm talking about before major rewrites, Disney overreach, and even input from Dave Filoni. Some of the early rumors talked about more plans for Darth Plagueis, which were originally going to be in the second season. But now we know that the original version of episode 5 was so much more brutal and unforgiving, and they nearly took things a bit too far. That was the episode where Qimir the Stranger slaughtered 7 Jedi. If you thought twisting Yord Fandar's neck was bad and using Jackie Long as a hole punch, there's a deleted moment that Disney looked at and said, yeah, we're not gonna do that, guys. That is way too graphic. So let me set the scene. Kofar's sun dips below the horizon, plunging the already shadowy forest into deeper darkness. Master Soul's Jedi team surrounds the entrance to Kalnaka's residence, where the Wookiee Jedi's already been slaughtered by May. Suddenly, May's blood runs cold with the realization that Qimir is there, her master, and he's fully aware of her failures and her disloyalty. But there is only one thing on the stranger's mind: everyone must fall to his blade. That's how the 4th episode feeds into the 5th, the actual massacre. And as we saw from the episode, guys, there are only a handful of survivors. Qimir may not be a full Sith, which the visual guide kind of alludes to, but he sure acts like a Sith. He's extremely powerful in the dark side of the Force, and uses all kinds of dirty tricks. For example, Trikata, turning his lightsaber on and off in combat to trick the opponent. And he famously also used cortosis to disable the Jedi's lightsabers. But in a now deleted scene, he took things a bit further. Manny Jacinto reveals this: Star Wars has always been PG, but you want to find some brutal aspects of these fights. There was one moment in particular we had to cut. Qimir grabs one of the Jedi and keeps slamming his head against a rock, over and over again. We wanted to show just how brutal this guy could be, with no remorse. So not only was Qimir extremely cruel and punctured numerous holes into a Jedi Padawan and then called her an it, he nearly took a Jedi by the head, no lightsaber, and just slammed his head into a rock, over and over again using his brute strength. And whether you love the show or you hate it, The Acolyte episode 5 held some of the show's better moments. Some of the lightsaber fights choreography was pretty awesome, but even without this scene, we still get a very good sense of how intense and brutal the stranger is. And Lucasfilm scrapping this scene, which was certainly more than PG, reminds me of George Lucas cutting many of the Jedi Temple scenes during Order 66. Off screen, Anakin did so much damage during Project Nightfall in Revenge of the Sith. And if you ever played the video game, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
The Council is no longer in control.
But George Lucas watched some of his scenes back and said, these are too traumatic and not family friendly enough. And I'm not talking about Shark T's 17 deaths. There's also the alternate version of Ki-Adi-Mundi's death, the now overwritten death of Barriss and Quinlan Vos. But I think one of the most brutal deaths has to be that of Sindralig. We saw it in the hologram when Obi-Wan finds out Anakin has become Darth Vader, the hologram which Master Kenobi has to turn off. Now did you know, my friends, it wasn't originally meant to be just a hologram. The scene, which is described as extra violent, was going to be part of the heartbreaking Order 66 montage. The prequel stunt coordinator Nick Gillard, who played Sindralig, revealed this. In the original version, quote, "It went horribly violent. You can't see it, but Anakin slices through Sindralig's Padawan's throat. It was so violent, they ended up shrinking it into a hologram, and George saw it and said, oh no, oh dear." I find it ironic that George Lucas was so against showing brutal scenes of Order 66, but was more than happy to show us barbecued Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, or the droid torture scene in Jabba's palace. How about Anakin burning alive like bacon, Jango Fett's decapitation at the hands of Mace Windu, Anakin Skywalker's massacre of the Tusken Raiders, Dooku's decapitation, Anakin's rampage on Mustafar, and the list goes on and on. So I guess brutality with purpose is what counts, but there was a limit when it came to Anakin slaughtering Jedi Padawans on screen. Same deal with the Acolyte. Qimir was about to do so much worse. As a former Padawan himself, Qimir was well prepared for the moment. He had long studied the Jedi Order he once served, and he knew the Knights stood no chance. According to the visual guide, many of his moves were well rehearsed. Now I understand that with Disney Plus TV shows there are limitations to what you can show, In the United States, The Acolyte was rated TV-14. In the UK, that's 12+. In other regions, it ranged from 12 to 16+. And even though I wasn't the biggest fan of this show, I think with the Sith brutality they hit the right balance. But unlike Vader, whose motivations were humanized in Revenge of the Sith, we didn't learn enough about Qimir. Was he just mad because Vernestra abandoned him? What kind of loss did he go through? And I suppose linked to this was another major criticism I had about The Acolyte, the lack of exploration of Sith philosophy. They tried to do that with the passion thing, the romantic interest between Osha and Qimir, which I understand a lot of fans found cringe. But if Qimir, like the visual guide says, is a Sith imposter, what was it that drew him to the philosophy in the first place? Was it the freedom of Sith philosophy? But a cherry on top would have been flashbacks to Sith of the past, the ones who he's trying to emulate, as the book says. And that was originally a rumor for the show, that there were going to be flashbacks to ancient Sith to help us understand the Sith of today. But what about Darth Bane? What about Tenebrous? What about Nihilus? One of the most evil and terrifying Sith in all of Star Wars lore. He was a great example of evil transcending just mustache-twirling stereotypes. He became a literal wound in the Force. After surviving the destruction of Malachor 5, Nihilus was transformed by the massive release of energy into something less than a man and more like a dark void. He didn't just use the dark side, he became an insatiable hunger in the Force. He was able to literally consume life. And I'm not just saying this without relevance, I want to see the Sith that inspired Qimir, someone who studied both the ancient Jedi and the Sith. Little did he know, they're still around. He didn't know Darth Plagueis, even if that's what the show implies. Plagueis only took an interest to him because he learned that someone was impersonating the Sith. We did hear Qimir recite the Sith code, but it would have been great to learn his own personal ambitions. To what end is he mimicking the Sith? What kind of power does he want? Because even in the expanded universe, the Sith take the philosophy of self-interest to the most extreme end, and those ends are pretty radical. So if you want to talk about brutality and brutal Sith, brutal actions, there is often a wider-ranging, far more sinister motive behind it. In Star Wars history, this has ranged from enslavement of entire species, starting massive wars, genociding entire planets as an act of power, and in the case of Palpatine, wanting to rule the galaxy, and to rule it with immortality. Just like his master Darth Plagueis, he was obsessed with cloning and manipulating midichlorians to create life. But their power and connection to the dark side is fueled by passion, with negative emotions like hatred and anger being their strongest assets. On a surface visceral level, seeing cool action scenes in a Star Wars project are all well and good, but in a Sith-oriented show, I would have loved to have seen them take it a bit further. But I guess that's one reason it was meant to be a 3-season show. But what do you guys think? Do you think they should have kept in the scene for The Acolyte? Let me know in the comments down below.